Hey guys, what's up? This is Indy Neidell here. Okay, I'm Indy Neidell.
I'm Spartacus Olsson.
And I'm Anna Deinhard.
And we're keeping that, right? We're totally keeping that. Yeah. And this is Out of the Foxholes, unscripted edition, where we sit here next to this fire on a lovely sunny day. And Anna asks us a bunch of your questions, and we answer them as best we can. And it's really fun. I don't know if you've seen the other ones, but this is I really enjoy this. This is my favorite new format, yeah?
I like it as well, a lot.
Okay, well, let's hit it.
Elias Vassinen, Slovakia during 1939. What did they do during the invasion of Poland? Throughout the war, were they just a puppet of the Reich or an ally with free will?
Well, they fought, didn't they? I think we can both, but you should go.
We start before the invasion of Poland, right? In March 1939, Hitler invited Josip Tiso, who was running, Slovakia. Thank you. No, thank you. Invited him to come and see him, and Tiso went and talked to him, and he said, "Hey, you want Slovakian freedom and autonomy and stuff. We're gonna go into the rest of Czechoslovakia. We already got the Sudetenland. We're going into the rest of it, and either you can run this independent Slovakia and be with us or under us or whatever you want to say it, or we're gonna split Slovakia among the rest of Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania." And Tiso said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And the next day is when that all happened, right? So then Slovakia was very much a puppet or client state. It wasn't an independent state, but
ideologically aligned, though.
Ideologically aligned. You go to Poland. Slovakia sent a few divisions. They were fighting with Army Group South, so they fought in southern Poland in the invasion of Poland. You get some weirdnesses, though, with Slovakia over the next few years. For example, when Barbarossa began, you'd think, since Slovakia is not that far away compared to parts of Germany, send troops over, there was big hesitation for Germans sending any Slovaks to fight in Barbarossa because they were Slavs and attacking other Slavs that, maybe they're not going to want to fight, or they'd not rebel, but they'd, desert or whatever. Slovakia did send some troops and stuff. As things worked further on, there was an issue with some of the desertion and stuff, especially once the war started really going not so well in Germany's favor. Now, from late August and in September and October 1944, you had the whole Slovak uprising, which we covered week by week in the World War II channel. So I'm not going to go into all that. But Slovakia became an actual battleground. And Germany was required to send in a lot of force to put down the Slovak uprising, the National Slovak uprising. And, Stalin's guys were just the other side of the border trying to get in and stuff.
I think that as a resistance movement is one of the most overlooked events of the war.
Sure.
The Slovak uprising was very, very important in lessening the defenses of the Germans by holding them back in the mountains. And
committing force and losing men that could be committed elsewhere against, for example, the Soviets. But so, you've got the puppet moments, you've got the we don't trust these moments, you've got the hey, we're going to fight anyway, and we're also going to desert at some level as well, and then you've got the uprising. So it was a bit of a roller coaster there.
As far as collaborating with the Nazis in their atrocities, Slovakia, however, under Tiso, does not have a very good record.
No.
They contributed tens of thousands of Jewish victims, Slovak Jewish victims, to the Holocaust, and also helped out to get Czech Jewish victims there, and arrested dissidents and sent them to the concentration camp system. So the Tiso regime was very, very much complicit in the Holocaust and the Nazi.
It's funny though. What do you think at the beginning? I think it was March 13th. 1939, that Tiso went to see Hitler, and Hitler said, either you can run Slovakia separate and under me as a thing, or we're just going to split it up among these other countries.
Well,
you can't really say no.
No, and then add to it that they had deep agreements regarding anti-Semitism.
And it was the next day. It was I think it's the 13th or 14th of March that actually happened. So
good question, though.
Yeah, very good question.
Neman Yazavik wants to know, speaking of North Africa and the Balkans, why did in the end Allies gave up on landing there and choose France? Landing there could have repeated the success of World War I. Some of Germany's allies, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Croatia, would fold. Just like when the Red Army arrived. From there, they could have pushed all the way to the Central Europe, northern Italy. The reasons why I think they gave up is logistics. Mountain terrain, poor road and railway logistic, and small port capacity.
Wait. So,
There's a lot to unpack.
You got me hooked at repeating World War One. I'm not certain what they mean, but perhaps they mean that the breakthrough on the Macedonia front was the first breakthrough in the chain of events that led to the whole thing. But that's not because it was an easier. That was the best defenses in all of Europe. It was only because there was like mass starvation in Bulgaria. They weren't getting any money from the German Empire, and they said we want to take our ball and go home. I cannot emphasize enough how incredibly good, particularly the Bulgarian defenses in that front, in the Macedonia Salonika front, whatever you want to call it, were in the First World War. They were, people talk about the defenses, the German defenses in depth on the Western Front. These were better. They even were self-sufficient with farms and the soldiers coming within, the area of defense and rotating guys in and out. They could have held on if they didn't just want to go home. So let's just nip that in the bud right there, that this was not some easy breakthrough.
But Churchill did advocate a long time
several times. Churchill wanted,
in World War II.
In World War II, Churchill wanted to do the soft underbelly of Europe. The overall arching problem with doing, let's say all terrains are created equal in everywhere from the Mediterranean and Western Europe. So you could just pick one stuff. If the Western Allies invaded through Greece and through Yugoslavia and stuff, you would not be having a pincer movement hit them from both sides thing. You just have one super long front with the Soviets. And this was very much creating the two front or three front war was very much, see, this is how you're going to win. I mean, the multi-front war is the best. Yeah, that's your best attack.
We covered this a lot in D-Day, of course, and I recommend anybody who hasn't seen that series to watch our hour by hour series on D-Day, and we talk a lot about this. There's a lot of ideas connected to this. Was there a race to Berlin, and maybe it didn't really matter if the Allies came in the West, and it was really Bagration that tipped the scales. And this is really a big, vast misunderstanding because this was an extremely coordinated move between Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt at the end of the day, that had agreed with obviously advised by their generals, that this was the best way to go about it, to come from both sides like a giant pincer.
The largest pincer movement in history. That's what this was.
Slam them from both sides, because what that would force the Germans to do, which it did, would be to fight in two fronts at the same time and rush to the middle, which would be Germany. And that's where they wanted to have them, because once inside of Germany, well, then things get a lot easier because of geography, because you're beyond the Alps, you're not on the ocean, you're over all of the big rivers except the Rhine. Well, once you've crossed the Rhine, and you have a battleground which is very manageable, while as a battleground where the Germans have that as their retreat is really, really dangerous.
If they can draw off force from France and draw off force from Western Germany and send it east and southeast, because obviously if the Allies are doing this big push, they're not going to have the boat power and the manpower to do the same thing in Western Europe.
So what they wanted to avoid at all costs was that France and Belgium became a redoubt.
Now, are they talking about after going into Sicily and going up Italy, are they talking about perhaps doing that instead? Because that's a different thing, but that's just, you're fighting Mussolini and stuff, obviously. You want to knock somebody out of the war. You want to go into Italy.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's also, you only really have two ways to get into Germany from there. Three. Either you go around the way of Trieste and you have a really long march, or you have to go through the Brenner Pass, or you have to go through the Bernardiner Pass where Hannibal went through. But it's
without elephants.
You have to you have tanks.
You have tanks.
Yeah, which might actually be more difficult.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's your answer. But don't forget about the Bulgarian defenses. against the Army of the Orient, the Five Nations Army in the First World War. They were unsung defenses. They were staggeringly good defenses. People forget about Bulgaria in the First World War.
They do.
Yeah.
Tim Rogers wants to know, Hermann Göring died by cyanide in his cell at Nuremberg, the night before he was to hang by the neck till dead.
Yes.
How and where did Hermann Göring get the cyanide?
They had there was an internet site, because it's hard to get cyanide in Germany at the time. It was from the dark web, which is a lot bigger than the regular web, which they say, but I don't know. No, it wasn't even from the dark web. It was from one of those bulk importers that buys a lot of cyanide from China and then sells it in Germany. This is 1946. It's a tough sell, There's probably another answer.
There is. Actually, the funny thing is that there's not an answer to this question.
What?
It's not clear until this day how it happened. So Hermann Göring, in his suicide note, claimed that he had brought 3 cyanide capsules with him into captivity, had hidden one so that it could be easily found, so that they thought that they'd taken away from him, that he hid one really secretly in his cell, and he had one in the sole of his shoe. That's what he claimed. That has never been substantiated. He also wrote in his suicide note that no guards should be treated badly because of this, because they had nothing to do with it.
You don't think of him as a guy that's really looking out for other people's well-being
somehow?
No,
but he was at this point for some reason. Now, so there are 3 competing theories as to how this happened, and none of them have been conclusively proven. The first one is the official record, which sort of agrees with what Göring wrote in his note. That is that he had 1 cyanide capsule in a hair cream box that he had taken with him into captivity, and that's where he got it out. And apparently there was also 1 found, and all of that is very unclear, because the investigation into it was very, very shoddy and very, very sloppy at the end of the day. Nobody really cared. He was dead. He would have died the next day anyway.
I still think it was the internet. The dark web.
It's a possibility, but there are 2 other possibilities.
Okay.
The other one is that, and he came out much later. I think his name was Wallace or Walleen or something like that. I don't remember exactly. A guard who took him to the actual cloakroom where all of his luggage that he had brought in with him was stored, and that's how he got to the cyanide that was hidden in one of his bags. That's one theory. And then in 2005, a guy called Stennis was his name, came forward, and he had been a guard.
Not Svennis, not the football coach.
No. Stennis or Stenin, or I don't have it exactly in my head, but he came forward in 2005 and said that he'd been silent about this for 60 years because because he was afraid of getting prosecuted, but that now that it was like so long ago, it didn't matter anymore, and he was 78 at the time, and his daughter had begged him to come forward and tell his story. And his one is a really interesting one, because it involves a woman called Mona, a mysterious woman called Mona, that apparently he wanted to get into her shorts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he met her.
They wore shorts back then.
Yes, they did. So, and he wanted to get into those shorts, and he met her at some dance parlor in Nuremberg or something like that. And she kind of like started asking him weird questions, and he wanted to impress her and prove, because she said she didn't believe him when he said that he was a guard at the prison. And she said, well, could you get something to poor Mr. Hermann Göring? Because Mr. Hermann Göring is suffering from very bad ailments. There's medicine in this pen.
Okay.
And then
that's interesting. But she still got it from the dark web.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
So we don't know, when we probably will never know.
Good question, though.
Scott Chomitsky, with the success the Germans were having with their U-boats against merchant shipping, why did Japan not use their submarines in a similar fashion?
Let's assume for the minute that all nations had the same fleets, the same amount of submarines, the same amount of merchant shipping. Japan still would not have done what the Germans did with their U-boat campaign, right? Within the Imperial Japanese Navy, the doctrine was that the combined fleet, Yamamoto's combined fleet, that was the star. That was the big thing. the way they were going to win the war was using the combined fleet to draw out the enemy into a one big battle where they were going to destroy the enemy by their superiority of their naval forces. Submarines were subordinated to the combined fleet as that. So the submarines, they were not doing any anti-merchant shipping campaigns. They were specifically offensively attacking foreign ships. And they had some successes, damaging or destroying some ships, even work against, carriers of Wasp, Saratoga. Not that many, and less as the war went on. But even in 1944, even when things were starting to go really bad for the Japanese Navy, they were still going to have that one decisive battle. So, whereas Hitler prioritized the U-boat campaign specifically since Britain was an island, to destroy enough resources to bring Britain to its knees, so it would have to come to the peace table. There was never any chance of the Japanese doing that, even had they had some kind of submarine advantage, which they didn't have an advantage. They didn't have a naval advantage over, well, the Allies, say the U.S., especially as the war went on and on and on, and the U.S. built more and more and more and more ships. And we did a special on the American anti-Japanese merchant shipping campaign, which in 1944 and 1945 was very effective and was not before that. I think that came out in 1944. You'll have to go back and look that up. But that actually talks about some of this stuff. But it is very important to remember that doctrine, which, by the way, people I think it was a Japanese guy, and I think it was mentioned in that episode. I haven't read it in a long time or watched it, so don't quote me on that. But people saying when you have just one simple doctrine that you put all the eggs in for your army or your navy or your air force, and that's how you're going to win this war, that's the way to lose the war. That's often the way to lose the war. And Japan's was, they really believed in the combined fleet and dealing with the military shipping of the enemy and not the commercial shipping.
I think it's also important to remember something that you touched upon right there, and that is that we have sort of an opposite situation. Japan is an island and Great Britain is an island.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't have the same premise, because what the Nazis are trying to do is, like you said, isolate Great Britain and cut them off from all of their resources, and also stop any American resources coming to the Soviet Union and so on. Okay, that similarity is there in Pacific as well. There's resources going to China, maybe.
Yeah,
but still, it's very different. It's Japan that is an island, and it's the Americans who have an interest of isolating them.
And cutting them off from their oil.
Yeah.
Or their rubber, or their
And that's
tin.
what they tried to do. So you have
So they
the
did
exact
do it.
opposite situation between Axis and Allies in those two different waters.
Well, that is it for today from Unscripted Out of the Foxholes. Those are some very good questions. Sparty, you want to tell them how they can get their question answered?
Absolutely. The best way to get them answered is by joining the Time Ghost Army at one of our officer levels, where we will, at some point, maybe not immediately, but guaranteed to answer one of your questions in one of these formats.
In one of these formats. Anything else to add? No, cool
You should
names.
subscribe.
Just subscribe.
Yeah.
Let's see you next time.
Excelsior!